All right, so for the letter E, escape, puberty is real right here. Jesus.
What for escape?
Ooh, escape. Escape.
Welcome to the True Crime ABC's podcast. I'm Dani.
And I'm Sarah. Take a journey with us through our alphabet of true crime, one letter at a time.
Listen through the end of each episode for reading recommendations and a sneak peek into what's going on in the podcast next week.
This episode is supported by the letter E. This week, E is for escape. In the notes, it says B is for escape, which is not
Escape.
the right letter. For real. This episode is supported by the letter E, and E is for escape, like prison escapes, which is what we're talking about this week. I found some prison escape statistics. They are not just putting that out there.
I bet they're probably not trying to publicize a lot of that information.
Yeah, no. The most reliable, valid seeming statistics I could find were from like 2001. And even then,
What?
I found it in two places where it had the same information, and I couldn't find the original reporting.
That's crazy. Maybe they stopped collecting information in 2001.
Maybe. They're like, we don't want anyone to know they're getting out. So a 2001 Slate.com article states that maximum security prison escapes are incredibly rare, thankfully. Most escapes tend to be smaller scale events and are usually from like a local minimum security correctional facility. The most recent statistics that I could get that are like readily available without having to purchase a subscription to some journal are a 1998 Bureau of Statistics study. Again, as a person who has a degree in a science field, 25-year-old
Stats are
data is not for me.
less than ideal.
Okay, so this data is from a 1998 Bureau of Justice study. And that year, 1998, 6,530 people escaped from or were AWOL from state prisons. I'm assuming AWOL from state prisons maybe meant they escaped from like a work release situation.
Okay.
Which really was only roughly half of 1% of the prison population at that time. So not a whole lot of people are, making the big escape. This is not Shawshank Redemption.
Sure.
Although that's a great-ass movie.
So prison escapes are in a downward trend compared to the early 90s, where the prison escapee percentage was closer to like 2%. In addition to the decline in escapes overall, the majority of escapees were recaptured shortly after their escapes. So in 1994, 13,346 of the 14,307 that escaped were returned to prison. So 93%. Not too bad.
It's a solid A-. I'll take it. Good job, America Prisons.
Right.
Also, yes, these are United States statistics, just to throw that out there.
It'd be interesting to know if, since the introduction of all of the technology that we've had since, 1998,
right,
if that's either increased or decreased that stat.
I have to assume it's gone down. I know I did see there were some things floating around 2019, 2020 data. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't find a valid source for it. It was just like some random article or whatever. But it does seem like prison security has gotten better.
Yeah.
So that's positive. So my story this week is taking place in Texas at the John B. Connolly Unit, which is a maximum security prison that became pretty famous in the year 2000 because of a notable escape. The Texas 7, which is what the group was known by, eventually, what they got called. The Texas 7 was an operation that 7 prisoners who were in the John B. Connolly Unit had sort of cooked up together. That really was very well thought out, but also really took advantage of like a moment of opportunity and maybe a little bit of luck. And these inmates included George Rivas, Michael Rodriguez, Joseph Garcia, Randy Halprin, Larry Harper, Patrick Murphy Jr., and Donald Newberry. George Rivas was actually kind of like the leader of the pack, if you will.
Okay.
He I watched a couple of interviews with him. He's very charismatic, well-spoken. Others had kind of referred to him as somewhat manipulative, but charming. And he was kind of the, the boss man when it came to making up this escape plan. So on December 13th, 2000, it was following the afternoon head count. Those 7 inmates that I just named overpowered prison workers and 16 prison officers.
What?
I couldn't really find what they did to overpower them.
Fairly impressive. Goodness.
Yeah, I mean, 7 guys taking on 20 people is pretty wild. They managed to steal uniforms, radios, and firearms.
Oh my gosh.
And the inmates then tied up the employees. They left them in a maintenance closet. And then, with the help of a stolen maintenance truck, they just drove themselves right on out of the prison. Wow. I guess if you're going to do it, that's the way to do it. Wow. Ugh, wild. Their immediate objective, the point of them getting out, was to create a diversion and then throw off the authorities. They ended up robbing a sporting goods store called Oshman's, where they stole more clothing and more firearms. And wildly, I mean, I guess December 13th, so we're getting close to Christmas. It seems kind of ballsy, but they commandeered the store's Santa Claus costumes.
What?
Yeah, totally exploiting Christmas, which seems super rude. I'm sure that did not go over well in Texas. You know how much Texas loves their Christian holidays.
Gosh.
Following the escape, so they had held up that sporting goods store. They basically went on a crime spree for a couple of weeks.
What?
And stole a bunch of money. They did a string of robberies. They stole money, firearms, vehicles. And it eventually sort of escalated them, since they were doing this so well and pretty seamlessly and not getting caught so quickly. They started to get the attention of higher up law enforcement agencies. Mm-hmm. They were eventually put on a most wanted list, mostly because they were really willing to be violent and use aggression. So there was a concern for public safety. I'm going to do a quick rundown of the crimes they committed during their crime spree. Nope. Words are hard. A timeline of the crimes they committed during their crime spree. So, on December 13th, 2000, they escape. They steal the uniforms, the radios, the firearms, the maintenance truck. Also on December 13th, they robbed that Oshman sporting goods store, stealing more firearms. On December 24th, they, armed with all the stolen weapons, they rob another sporting goods store. And during that robbery, they confront and fatally shoot a police officer, an Irving, Texas police officer named Aubrey Hawkins. On December 25th, they steal an RV and travel to Colorado. Then January 4th, 2001, in that stolen RV, they cross the U.S.-Mexico border into Acuña, Mexico. And they don't really like it, so they come back to the United States, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Go farther south. I don't know. Find it somewhere else.
Go to Panama, Nicaragua. You might like it somewhere else. Don't just come back to the place that wants to lock you back up. Wild, but you can't fix some levels of stupid. January 6, 2001, they rob a Radio Shack, which is so early 2000s, I can't, in Pearland, Texas.
Radio Shack was probably just take it. Just fine. Take whatever you want at that point.
Oh, yeah. They're like, you know what? You can take this Nokia changeable faceplate phone. You can take this MP3 player that's the size of a library book. I don't care. Yeah. So they robbed the Radio Shack on January 6, 2001. Then January 15th, 2001, they commit a robbery in Houston, Texas. On January 19th, 2001, so we're over a month now that they've been on this little spree. They rob an AutoZone in Pearland, Texas, which they've had a couple hits in Pearland, Texas, which seems like, why aren't you guys moving around more? Do you want to get caught? It seems very silly. Then finally, on January 21st, 2001, there's a routine traffic stop, which we will talk about in just a while. So, we go from December 13th, 2000 to January 21st, 2001.
Oh boy.
So, the escape and the subsequent crime spree prompted an intense nationwide manhunt. Law enforcement agencies at the federal, state, and local levels, basically, they mobilized so that they could get these 7 guys. There was a huge reward offered for information leading to their capture. I found different numbers, so I don't even want to give a number on the off chance I'm wildly wrong. But there was a pretty solid, large reward provided. And news of their activities plus the murder of Officer Hawkins really kind of got everybody's butt into gear. Civilians were looking out for them. Law enforcement agencies were hunting them. And it eventually landed them on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. So then their faces were plastered everywhere. There was really, I think this is kind of the time, the early 2000s, people were watching TV. People were watching the news. If somebody came up and said, like, hey, local fugitives in your area, like, people were watching that. And people, I think in general, people want to typically help. And, like, or they want to be the guy who has got, like, a cool story. Hey, I found the Texas 7. You know? So, the media coverage and stuff actually played a pretty pivotal role in finding the Texas 7. So, the end here. Or, well, their capture at least. So, the nationwide manhunt eventually came to a conclusion on January 21st, 2001. Where the 7 were located in Woodland Park, Colorado. It was a routine traffic stop that led to the confrontation between the fugitives and the local law enforcement. There was a shootout, and during that shootout, one of the Texas 7, Larry Harper, took his own life.
Oh, gosh.
The rest of the group was then apprehended, and they were taken into custody. So now they're the Texas 6. George Rivas, the ringleader guy, was actually sentenced to death.
Oh, Texas.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they've got like a drive-through lane for that shit. So, because he was the one who actually murdered Officer Hawkins. Michael Rodriguez, who also played a pretty key role in planning the escape and those crimes, received a death sentence as well. Everyone else sort of got a mix of them. I do have specifics. So, George Rivas, again the ringleader of the group, was sentenced to death and was executed on February 29th, 2012. Donald Newbury was also sentenced to death and was executed on February 4th, 2015. Joseph Garcia, he was also sentenced to death and was executed on December 4th, 2018. Patrick Murphy, was convicted under something Texas does called the law of parties, which basically means if you were accomplice, you may as well have committed the crime. Which seems,
So does that allow them to charge him with, like...
He could get a death sentence.
I was going to say a death sentence rather than just whatever,
And he did.
Oh.
But his death sentence was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, not the Texas Supreme Court, like the big old boys, in 2019, because he claimed religious discrimination in his trial.
Okay.
Because he was a Buddhist. And then his case was kind of sent back to lower courts for review. So he did not get a death sentence, but I think he is in jail forever. Randy Ethan Halprin was also sentenced to death, but his case faced a lot of legal challenges because there were some accusations of prosecutorial misconduct and potential bias against him. Again, because religious bias, he is Jewish.
Okay.
His case is still ongoing, but he is still on death row. Larry James Harper was the one who took his own life during the shootout and was not sentenced posthumously for anything. And then Michael Anthony Rodriguez was sentenced to death, but also died by suicide on August 14th, 2008, while on death row. So, yikes.
Yeah.
this is kind of one of the, like, I think I remember this being on TV. I don't think I paid much attention to it, but 2001, I would have been, like, more than just, like, a fetus.
Yes, more than yes. Well, when was it going on?
2001 or 2000, late 2000, 2001.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there were other things going on in the news too. I don't remember reading or seeing about it, but you know, I was in high school, so
Yeah.
sure I had
Yeah.
lots of other things going on.
Right. What? You weren't just
Watching
watching
the
TV
news.
to hear about the Texas 7? Come on. Who even are you?
Oh my gosh. All right. So this week I have a story about the Tyson gang saga.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's called a couple different things, but this is the story of Gary Tison, Tison. So I'm probably saying that wrong anyway, but so
I mean, that sounds like Tyson.
yeah. So this is 70s. This happened in 1978, so a few years ago.
Like, yeah.
So
5 seconds ago, no biggie.
So this guy, Gary Tison, he's not really a great dude.
I'm surprised.
I know, right? He had just been actually put in prison for writing bad checks, so a little bit of fraud.
Yeah. That's a little fraud among friends.
Right. So he was already in prison for that. He also had a friend, I guess, that was in there, or an acquaintance that was in there named Randy Greenawalt. And essentially they were both sick of being in the Arizona State Prison that they were in. Surprised they weren't having a fun time.
What?
I know, right? So Tyson, he's not a great dude, and he's pretty intimidating. He's like feared and respected by, you know, the inmates that he is serving time with. And he apparently had also killed a policeman for shoving his wife. So,
Oh my god.
yeah. So again, not a great dude. And then
No.
Greenawalt, the other guy who was doing time, was a serial killer as well in his own right.
Oh, what a darling.
Yeah. So, and he would, apparently his target was truck drivers, so he would just attack them while they were sleeping. So super great guy as well.
Gosh, what a jerk.
Yeah. So these two guys, serving time in Arizona State Prison, they were both such great guys. While they were doing time, they were transferred to a lower security unit because they had excellent behavior.
Oh my god.
So,
A serial killer?
I mean, they had been doing time and they had been, you know, model inmates and, you know,
Ugh.
yeah.
I'm looking up what these guys look like.
Oh, there's tons of pictures from like the event and everything that I can share. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, they look like creepers. Wild. Okay, carry on.
Like I said, this guy Gary, Gary again, not a great dude, but he has 3 sons that are also involved in this story. So you've got Donnie, Ricky, and Ray. And so their dad convinces them to pull off this prison escape, involving both of the inmates, so both Gary and Randy, and then also, you know, the 3 brothers. The brothers are on their way to the prison, going down these back roads. They end up getting flat tires. And so obviously their plan has a wrench thrown in it. So they decide to kidnap a family of 4, who...
That's usually what I do when I get a flat tire.
Well, you know, they needed a vehicle. So
Right.
they ended up actually killing the entire family
Ugh.
on the way.
Gross. Why?
Yeah. It's pretty terrible. So they ended up killing the entire family, taking the car, and the family wasn't found until about a week later, because this was out in the middle of the desert in Arizona.
Right.
So,
Oh my gosh, how horrible.
brothers tried to get a plane to try to fly to Mexico.
No biggie.
No big deal.
You know what? The Texas 7 says it's not that great there. They should just stay in the U.S.
So they weren't able to get a plane.
I'm shocked.
I know. So they decided to steal a van. The couple
Same thing.
Right, exactly. So the couple that was driving the van, they were vacationing in Colorado. They killed them as well, and their bodies were later found in the woods.
It just doesn't seem necessary to kill them.
Yeah. Okay, so they tried to get the plane, but they couldn't get the plane. So now they have the van. So they end up taking the van, and they go to visit their dad in prison. And Ricky is the one who ends up going in. They're chatting in like the fenced-in picnic area.
Sorry, I just thought of not another teen movie. It's Ricky!
Oh my gosh.
That is immediately... I can't hear the name Ricky without that being the only thing that pops into my head.
I love it.
It's
a great movie.
Somewhere Nads just heard that. Her ears are ringing because she's like, Ricky.
Oh my gosh, I love them.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so they go to visit Dad at prison.
Yep. So Ricky is talking in the fenced-in picnic area, and then Raymond and Donald arrive with a basket of food. And of course, they're inside the lobby, and instead of the food, they actually pull out shotguns.
What?
And
they
demand.
Just taken down on a picnic?
I know, it's so weird. Yogi Bear style. But they...
A picnic basket?
Of course, they demand the release of their father. And Randy has done his part by disabling the prison telephone and alarm system. So he was a pretty smart guy.
That is smart.
So yeah, so at this point, the 5 of them strolled back out the door to get back to the van. Obviously, they had taken over the situation. They were able to get out of there. And essentially the next day, they go on this like days long, similar to your story, days of like like spreading terror that nobody knew where they were at. So the next day, they were stranded because of course they blow out one of the tires. And unfortunately, Sergeant John Lyons stopped to help. He was a Marine. He was traveling with his wife, infant son, teenage niece, but unfortunately, they were killed by Tison and Greenwald. Of course, this was like a manhunt. People were going crazy looking for these people all over the place in Arizona, and neighboring states, all of that. One of the things that the cops did is they established a roadblock near Gary's hometown of Casa Grande. So they set up the roadblock, and essentially they got the van. Some hours later, they started slowing down, but of course everybody that was in the van started shooting.
Oh, how nice.
And they blew through that roadblock. There was another roadblock a few miles down the road, and this time they were really, the cops were ready to get everybody. So
they didn't do like the tire, what are they called? The tire strips?
You would think
seems like
a no-brainer.
A no-brainer. Yeah, it can't be that expensive.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Donald Tison, the son of Gary, was killed in the gunfire, the shootout. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was apparently like a half an hour long gun battle between everybody.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, which is a very long time, it seems like.
Yeah.
Greenewalt and the rest of the Tisons ended up surrendering because they ran out of ammunition, of course.
Oh, gosh. All that to just surrender.
Well, Gary didn't surrender. So the sons did, but Gary ended up taking off into the desert.
Smart move.
Yeah. Gary basically was on the run and eluded pursuit until the last week of August. when they
wow.
found his body in the middle of the desert. So he had actually died of starvation
I mean, I guess if you're a
and
horrible human,
dehydration.
that's
Yeah.
a fitting way to go.
Yeah.
Horribly. So did his sons then end up in jail for a long time?
The sons we will get to. Greenwald made it through, the capture and the arrest. But he would be sentenced to death, and he was actually executed
Oh,
in
wow.
1997.
Oh, wow. So on death row for a long time, though.
Yeah.
Was that like 20 years?
So, yeah,
Crazy.
I was going to say 78, 79 to... So...
They don't have that express lane like Texas.
Exactly. Gosh. So Ricky and Raymond Tison, right, the two brothers that lived, Donald passed away. So they were initially sentenced to death, but their sentences were set aside by the Arizona Supreme Court in 1989. And they were both sentenced to life in prison in 1992. So it was changed from an initial death sentence to just life in prison.
Wow. Crazy. Oh, that's a good one. I kind of want to watch that movie now.
Yeah.
I bet I could get Nick to watch it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That seems up his alley. He loves a good like westerny type of movie with shootouts and whatnot.
And the book goes into a lot more detail around, there's a couple, so there were actually 2 other escapes that Gary had tried and didn't, successfully get out. So pretty interesting story. But yeah, it goes into a lot of detail around how Ricky at least said he was manipulated by his father.
Right,
And
of course.
basically, of course, I wouldn't have done what I did.
Right.
What I know now, so.
Sure you wouldn't, Ricky. Yeah, bitch.
So, pretty interesting one this week.
Yeah, that's crazy. Ah, good job. My book recommendation this week is called The Texas Seven, The True Story of Murder and a Daring Escape by Gary C. King. I will say it's a really good story if you just want to know like the facts of my story from today. It's not great if you like a really interesting, sucks you in type of read.
Okay.
This is definitely a read for someone who likes a nonfiction book.
Okay. That's fair. I mean, that's a fair assessment.
I struggled getting through some of it. I didn't read the whole thing, not gonna lie. I struggled getting through some of it just because I'm not a super nonfiction reader. Like, I really have to be interested in something to want to read nonfiction, which is great because I'm a reading teacher and, yeah. So here we are. But again, it's just a good account of what happened while the crimes were being committed and like a timeline of those crimes. It, however, does not actually get into the trials and the sentencing of the men afterwards.
Okay.
So, but it was a good read. It was factual.
Good deal. My book recommendation this week is The Last Rampage, The Escape of Gary Tison. That's by James W. Clarke. Clarke with an E. Yes. So this is also
Clarke-y?
a pretty factual account of the escape that I'm talking about today. So there's also a movie version of the book with the same name. And let me see. I believe that came out in 2017. Heather Graham was in it.
Oh, Robert Patrick. He plays like the bad guy and everything.
Oh, yeah.
The dad from Home Alone.
Nice. So yeah, a good follow-up read if you want more information and want to learn more about the story we're going to talk about today.
I also feel like I should book recommendations add just an honorary mention of Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King.
Yeah, for sure.
Because is there a better freaking book and movie? Like, how many times have you watched Shawshank Redemption on TBS, guys? Come on, don't lie to yourself.
A lot.
Every single time it's on, no freaking lie. Oh my god, I'm sure Nick is out there like, when are they gonna be done so I can turn the AC?
Oh my god, I'm sure.
It's been so hot lately. I literally, like, we had testing this morning because Florida tests 3 times a year, which is super fun.
Insane.
Yeah. And my kids were cooped up inside for 2 hours just sitting, looking at a computer screen. So I was like, oh, we're going out for recess today. I don't care if there's a heat advisory. You guys need to run. So we went outside, and I was wearing a dress and sandals, and I put my hair up because I thought it was going to be a hot mess, and I was dying. But my kids were still like, I was standing in the shade, and they were still just like out playing soccer, running around in the full blazing sun. I'm like, what? Why? How? How do they do this? It's wild, these Florida kids, man.
I can only imagine. Like, there's no damn way.
No, it's really hot. It's really hot here.
Next week's episode will be supported by the letter F. Check us out on social media and give us your best guesses on what our theme for next week will be.
If you'd like to hear more from us, please check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and Patreon at True Crime ABC Podcast, or email us your thoughts, ideas, and listener stories to truecrimeabcpodcast@gmail.com. We did it!
Yay! Episode 5.
I know, 5 in. We've only got 21 more letters, and then we get to start over again.
Oh my
in season
god,
2.
I know. Fun.
But thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.
We've been getting really good feedback. Hey, we have, let me look again on Apple
Social media
Podcasts.
shoutouts.
If everybody could please leave us a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts. Obviously, we love 5 stars, but like, you do you. We're not here to influence your decision. But like, we want to influence your decision, so
Vote for us.
yes, vote for us.